Sorry. I'll start over. I hope you're not sick of hearing about Experience Builder. Sorry, front row, you have to hear me say that again. So I hope you're still not sick of that. Exciting time to be in the Drupal community. A lot of things going on with Drupal CMS and Experience Builder. So very excited to talk to you about it here today. I have a rhetoric question in the title. Are you ready for Experience Builder yet? Probably not yet. Hopefully you feel more ready after this session. So let's check in on that then. My name is Lauri Timmoni. I'm a senior product manager at Acquia, and I'm a product lead for the Experience Builder initiative. I've been part of the Drupal community for around 14 or 15 years at this point, and some of the projects that I've done in the community in the past has been the admin theme for Claro. I was one of the lead engineers for that some years back. So here's a guy who we know. He's made some bold statements about Drupal CMS on the stage, one of them being that he wants Drupal CMS to be the gold standard for no-code website building. And that's sort of what the Experience Builder is really focused on solving. We've split the Drupal CMS into 3 different subcategories of work that we're looking into. First is installation, just getting Drupal CMS set up, getting something, sort of getting into Drupal CMS, getting into Drupal in the first place. The second bit is what you need to do to configure from that step where you install Drupal to actually get it ready, get your brand inside there, get all of your content and all of that. And then finally, the final step is launching your site in some sort of hosting. What Experience Builder is about is that middle step, what comes after installing Drupal in order to get your site ready to be published. So what is the challenge that we're trying to solve with Experience Builder? Today, there's a trade-off that exists in terms of what kind of solutions exist in Drupal. Either you're forced into building sort of a cookie-cutter website where you just download a theme and a bunch of things on your site, and it kind of looks like other Drupal sites when you do that. The alternative is that you go into complex coding type of tasks. You need a lot of development, a lot of experience to be able to make that happen. So we want to break that trade-off by providing better tools so that you can actually build websites that are custom to your brand, custom to your requirements, without having to go into the complexity of writing this complex code, or without having to sacrifice on the flexibility of meeting your requirements. So on a high level, Experience Builder promises to do 3 different things. It delivers an easy way to create content and pages. It provides an easy way to build components. And it allows you to manage your full site design inside there. So let's dive a little bit deeper into how we could actually build a site with Experience Builder today. So the demo parts that I have in here are essentially me just installing Experience Builder. I've installed a couple of other modules, like the navigation module in Drupal core, just to make the experience a little bit nicer. But essentially what I did here is this is something I did in a single take. So you see me making a lot of mistakes there. But I wanted to give sort of a more real and honest preview here. So we can see all the bugs and all the things that go wrong as well in here. And some of it is as a response because I saw some of the feedback from some of the sessions that I've done in the past where people are questioning, is this real because it looks so polished? So I thought, I'm going to take a different approach here. So that's taking the pressure off from me to do a live demo, because it's very hard to write and do everything in here, but you still get the real experience. So I have a very empty site here. I'm using the Start theme from Drupal core. I click Edit, which launches the Experience Builder. So this is what you saw in the Dries note already. We have the component library on the left, which can include different kinds of components that you would need in order to build your site. So that could be things like your hero component, for example. Or it could be a card component. Or it could be text with an image, like we have in here. So let's dive deeper into how could we build this image with text component. So we have an image as part of this. We have a heading, and we have text. So that's essentially what this component consists of. There's several different ways in which we could actually build this, because we have an image on the left, and then we have the text and the heading on the right. We could build this with a 2-column component And then we would essentially have an image component, we would have a heading component, and we would have a text component. So that's one way of building that. So essentially it becomes 4 different components. Well, let's introduce some additional requirements to our component, because there's always complexity in building these design systems. So I'm kind of trying to go through the thought process of like, how would I actually build this component if I were to build something? And soon enough, we get to actually build that together using the tools that I would use to do this. So I want to introduce a setting that allows me to change the image position. So we can have the image on the left or on the right, depending on what kind of content we're creating. That allows you to do those nice content pages where you have image on the left first, and then you have image on the right after that. What I also want to do is that I want to make sure that on the mobile, the image comes always first, and then there's text after that. And when we have this full set of requirements, we realize we need to rethink this approach in how we built this component. We can't actually use the 2-column component approach anymore, because that would introduce too much complexity to that 2-column container. We would have to then introduce some sort of props to reverse on mobile or things like that, which I think is a little bit too complicated for the content creator. So what I'm going to do actually is then just build this text with image component instead. And I believe that this is going to be a way in which we are going to be building a lot of components in different projects in Drupal, because of this meets the sort of criteria of you can build really beautiful designs that work nicely in different responsive states, but you still have that great content authoring experience where you don't have to fill in too many different fields in order for you to be successful. So how could we actually then go about building one of these components? You've probably heard about single directory components at this point. So I'm going to just briefly talk about that, not go into too much detail. I want to talk about the more exciting things, the JavaScript components in a bit. But essentially, how you could define that is you could build a single directory component. In the component.yaml file, you would define what are those inputs that you want your component to have. And then what we would do is we would load that as single directory component to Experience Builder, and we would generate a preview based on your markup and a form based on the properties that you specified in there. So all of that is generated automatically. You don't have to take any screenshots and put them in your components. It all sort of just works and is figured out for you. The field types are decided depending on what property types you are defining in the props. So all of that is happening automatically for you. So let's move on to the JavaScript components, which is something that I'm really excited about myself. So in this demo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build that text with image component. I'm going to use some AI assistance on that, because I didn't want to go from building that from scratch. What's funny about it is that it didn't work out entirely perfectly in here. So we'll see sort of me struggle through that process. So I'm going to use Vercel's v0 to build this. So I'm going to write a prompt with all of my requirements for that component. I did speed up the text. I'm not this fast to write up. I thought it would be too much to watch me in real time to try to do this. So I'm just telling it that we are using React without Next.js, and we are using no TypeScript, and we have Tailwind, because it does have a little bit of bias towards the tooling that Vercel is promoting. It generates me that component pretty quickly. It did some funky stuff this time. I did actually try out to generate some components with Vercel v0 before this demo, but it's good enough for me to actually start building it based on that. Looks pretty close to what I had. So now I'm going to go to Experience Builder. I'm going to create a new component in there. So I just click the Add New in the library, which then opens up the code editor. I paste that component in. It is not loading yet at this point. I figured quickly that it's because of the image. I need to change the image properties in there. And I need to update the code as well. It looks like it's also trying to load an icon, which I don't have, so I'll need to remove that from there. I also removed the state because it took the flipping. It thought that I want the states inside the component, which is kind of an interesting requirement. Not exactly what I wanted, so I can just remove that and change it into a regular property instead. So now the component is starting to look good. I'm just going to set up some of the props and see if I could get this to actually render in the preview. Looks like I'm getting an error. And now we get our component to work. Let's test out the non-mobile mode. That looks good. I'll just remove the CTAs to make this a little bit simpler because I didn't actually need those. Then I'll make the image position working. We can also, essentially what is happening in here, we can select the type of the properties in there, and that maps back into the properties that you would be specifying in your single directory components. It is just the UI for generating those. So what gets stored in the config as a result of creating these components is essentially the same as what you would have in single directory components. So what I'm doing now is I'm just making sure that I have properties for all of the different things that I want to have configurable on that right sidebar so that all of my content can be edited in there. Otherwise, it's going to be just hard-coded in the component. I'm also making sure that we are accounting for empty states because, for example, the heading is something that I don't want to require to exist always. Checking that everything looks good. Realize that I still need that list option where we select whether the image on the left is on the left or on the right. And then we're done with this component. Oh, a little bit funkiness with the toolbar or the Docker. We can see that when I change the default value, it actually updates the preview as well. So we can change the default value so we can test the different variations of our components easily without even having to place them on a page. So you can just test everything inside the code editor. Everything looks good. When I'm ready, I click the add to components, which adds this component to the component library. And then we can see that we can just drag that component to a page. And so that was me, without any rehearsing, creating this component that I wanted to create in, I think it took me 5 minutes and 30 seconds. So that is pretty fast that we can create these components with this tool. That is the idea. So I didn't want to show you me going through the creation of, all of the components that I had to create in here. So I spent some time to repeat the same steps to create a bunch of other components so that we can create something a little bit more exciting than just something that requires this text and an image component. So I have my component library now set up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to act how would I actually then set up this page? So I'll need some images. So I'm going to use the media library to add these images in. What I'm going to do, I just copy paste it. So I just did Command C and Command V in there. And that allowed me to then create a new version or new copy of that first component that we had. I'm just going to reverse that and then add another image there so I can get that nice layout in there. All right, the content piece is starting to look pretty good, so I'm going to go focus on my header now. So I created this header component, which has a slot inside it now, which I can then use to place my navigation inside. So the header is a component. I'm placing inside that slot a navigation block from Drupal. So we can combine these components that we've built with Drupal blocks. What I'm doing next is I'm actually going to change the link text from blue into black because the blue didn't look really all that nice in this site. So I'm having a little bit jankiness with the right sidebar because of the responsive previews in there. But I can just change the text to black, and I should be able to go back. So we don't see the actual changes reflected in there. That is because there is a bug in there right now. So this is what I'm saying. I'm showing you the real state of things right now. So there's a bug which prevents these overrides to be loaded from the autosave state. So whenever I make changes in there, when I created those components, when I added components to the page, all of those changes get saved automatically as we make changes. So if I refresh the page, the changes would be there. they don't get actually saved in the, or published in the publicly visible site. So they're just saved inside this experience builder state inside itself. We can see all of the changes that we have inside that experience builder workspace in here. So when we click the top right review changes panel, it shows all of the changes that we've done in here. So we can see that the navigation menu has been changed in here. It just didn't load the changes to the preview. So I'm just going to go ahead and publish all of these changes so that I could see them reflected in here. So I'll hit the publish all changes, and we can see that now the overrides actually appear in here. Lots of little fun states to consider in here. So I'm going to actually now move this to a header, because what I did before was actually it was just part of this one page. So I'm going to go to the move to global region. So I right-click that component. We can see different kinds of options in there. I'm moving it to the header, and that now moved it to the page template, which means that it's going to be displayed on every page. Now I click this little navigator on the top bar, which allows you to navigate between different pages inside Experience Builder. So even though we clicked edit on the home page, it doesn't mean that you would be limited to editing just the home page in here. Like we were editing different components, but you can also navigate to create new pages or to edit other pages. You can also delete pages. You can essentially do all of your page management inside here. So I'm going to just hit the new page to create a new page inside here. And we can see that the header is applied automatically to this other page. So I'll just navigate back, and we can see that the changes are still there. We can also edit the headers by just double-clicking on the layers panel, and it opens up a special header editing mode or footer editing mode where you edit only that specific region. The idea being that you don't accidentally then drag components to your header or footer and then realize that, oops, that change actually showed up on all of the pages on my site. So that is sort of the basic premise of how we build content, how we make changes in Experience Builder. What we're doing is essentially now copying this recipe of this is the visual editing experience, bringing it all of the features that we think need that treatment in Drupal. So we've started with the page creation, global headers and footers, but that's just really the beginning. So what I've shown you so far is essentially everything that you can already test these things yourself. They exist. They somewhat work, as we saw, that there's still some bugs in there, but they do work. So I'm going to move forward towards talking about some things that are coming up in future instead of things that work right now. So the first bit that I want to talk about is modeled content. So modeled content is essentially what we have content types for in Drupal today. So you could use that for things like events, products, when you need to display something consistently. So what I was showing in the Experience Builder preview is essentially pages, where the focus is really on the visual presentation. There's not necessarily a structure behind it. It's just a collection of components that you built there. That means that you're creating pages where the reusability of those pages is low. You might be able to reuse specific parts of that page, but you can't necessarily, there's no consistency between how those pages are constructed. That means that you can provide a lot of flexibility to the person who is creating those pages at the cost of being able to reuse them. Then, the focus of the modeled content is where you want to be able to reuse the content. Maybe you want to retrieve that content through an API, or maybe you want to build multiple displays using view modes for that. Like maybe you want to display a card or different variations of the page using that. That means that you can reuse it a lot, and it can live a very long time because once you've defined a product in there, you know how to treat that in future. The downside of that is that it doesn't provide a lot of flexibility. And something that I've seen that the tooling that we have in Drupal has historically been very geared towards the structured content, which is very good. We're very good at doing structured content. The challenge, though, is that we thought that hammer is something that can fix every problem. And the challenge is that then you end up with extremely complex content models because you try to solve these unstructured, complex, sort of more visual pages where there's no actual structure. We try to interpret them and then create actual content models to them. So Experience Builder makes a very strong stance on the fact that we separate those two from one another. And we recommend you to actually use pages for these, content where there isn't that predictable pattern of how they are being constructed. So the idea of Experience Builder is that it's a very component-centric system. Everything that you built is around the components. So now we need to figure out how could we actually then get the components work in the world where we actually have structured content, where we have data that we have modeled. So what we saw in the demo is we were creating inline content to these components. So we placed the component, and then in line where the component is placed, we added content in there. And that's unstructured content. What we can do is we can also place in these fields dynamic sources. And this is where structured content then comes in. So dynamic source means that instead of placing that content in place in there, we say that, OK, go and get this data from this field inside a content type. Let's say you have a product. Show the product name in here. Or show the product description in here. And that way, you can create different displays using your components out of your structured content. You're also not just limited to what Drupal provides as a data source, because you could also use this to get data from external APIs. We would just have to have APIs and UIs that would actually provide you the tools for that. But sort of fundamentally, if you look at this, you can map any sort of data in here, so long as it has the right shape. So it sounds very complex, maybe, but as an experience, it doesn't have to be that complex, because how it looks like it is actually when you're building one of these templates where you can do the mapping, there's a link button, which then opens up a list of options. The list of options is very similar to what you could consider Drupal's tokens today, but with the exception that we actually know what is inside that token, and we know what is the expected data, what is the expected data type of this field. And we can do mapping of, OK, these are the fields that actually make sense in here. These are the fields that we can display in here. We also have a concept of being able to transform data into different shapes. So that way we can then introduce more complex mappings of data. So for example, in here, where we have a link, because of the URL, it's essentially to be expected. It needs to be something HTTP or /. It has a certain shape. There's only one link field in this content type, which means that we only would show in the context of this field a single field, providing a good user experience for whoever is creating this template. Now the challenge becomes then, OK, how do I figure out what are the why is my field that I want in here not showing up? So we've kind of moved the problem elsewhere now, but that's something that we need to solve for in here. The next bit is that we've talked a lot about how you can create your components inside Experience Builder using the in-browser code editor. But especially here, we have a lot of developers who are like, I have my own tooling already set up. I'm accustomed to using a local development environment. Maybe in that case, it's not such a big deal that we remove the need for a local development environment. And maybe in that case, the flexibility to use your own set of tools actually weighs more in there. And that's where a CLI-based tool that allows you to manage your components outside of Experience Builder comes in. So the question I've heard a lot of folks ask is that, maybe I have a component library that exists for my company. Like maybe we built a site using React or Vue.js or Svelte already. We have all the components in there. We have our band working in there. How do I bring that into Drupal? Why would I have to rebuild all of that in Twig or some other technology if it all just works? Or maybe it's just a question of I don't like to use React and Tailwind. I want to use, I don't know, Vue.js or Svelte or whatever else. Or maybe you just want to get your components outside. Like you built them in Experience Builder and you're now, I want to actually use these in some other tool that is able to use React components. And so that's where the CLI tool comes in. And I've been working on this week. It's still in a pretty rough shape. I would say that there's some challenges with the compilation step because of the compilation step that we have in Experience Builder is a quite unique one. So I'll have to work with Ballant to figure out how to make that work. But here's sort of what I was able to get working so far. Is I was able to get the uploads working. I just needed to recompile them inside Drupal again after that. Essentially what happens here is I have an end variable where I set Drupal sites URL. I have a authorization token in there, and then I select which components I want to upload in that site. And then if the component already exists in the site, it's going to just update that in there. If it's a new component, it's going to upload that as a new component. And right now, because of for these components, I had configured that I'm using React for these. So in the end variables, I can specify what is the framework that I'm using for these components in here. I had specified I'm using React. So what happened is that they also showed up in the user interface, and I was able to actually edit them inside the code editor after uploading them. So we're making good progress on this, and it's something that we believe we are able to show fully working probably at the end of the week, hopefully. I know Balint is laughing, but I've been making very good progress on this myself. It is the engineers laughing at the product managers. Optimism, yeah. Yes, we'll see. I guess that's a challenge. All right. So migrations for existing sites is definitely something that probably a lot of folks in here are interested about, because we are probably using paragraphs, layout builder, other tools that exist already to build sites. And we're thinking about, okay, how can I then get into using Experience Builder? Yeah, Experience Builder is great for new sites, but we have to also think about what can we do about existing sites. So we've thought about an approach where we can allow multiple solutions to coexist in a single site. The idea is that you can essentially then install Experience Builder, have layout builder or paragraphs running in there, and then go in and you would enable Experience Builder to specific content types that are ready for Experience Builder to use. Or maybe you would just use Experience Builder pages to build landing pages in there. That would be totally fine as well. That way, you're able to just leverage Experience Builder very easily. The challenge in that case, when you're able to install Experience Builder on an existing site, moves from can I install Experience Builder to how can I get my components inside Experience Builder, because you've probably built your components in some other way today. And that's why we are integrating with existing assets such as blocks, layouts, and paragraphs potentially. I just met with Birder a few weeks ago, who is the maintainer of paragraphs, and had some very high-level ideas on how we could potentially make this work for future. So there's some exciting movement around that. What we have already working is you've seen me dragging the navigation block on the page. So we have this already figured out for blocks. Layout plugins is probably not that as challenging problem as paragraphs, but that's something that we don't have yet because it's very specific to implementing a migration from Layout Builder. So that's something that becomes only relevant once we actually start working on that. And then, with the step 1 and 2, you're able to essentially create new pages using whatever exists in your site. The third step becomes, how can I then move my existing content over to Experience Builder? The challenge here is that it's actually really hard to do a migration that works 100% of the time. And that's where we've been thinking about approaches where we would maybe move some of that responsibility of the quality assurance to the content creator. So what if instead of trying to migrate all of your content at a one go and assume that everything works correctly, or QA everything and fix everything at once? Very challenging, because you probably have needs where your content creators need to be able to continue making changes there whilst you would be doing that quality assurance of the whole set of content. So instead, how about we allow you to move individual pieces of content from your existing tools into Experience Builder. When you move that to Experience Builder, your content creator is responsible for doing that quality assurance, making sure that everything works as it should. If there's some tiny changes, tiny tweaks that needs to be made in there, which is probably the case in most cases, that's the hardest part, is maybe you can get like 90% of 100% of your content working, and then the last 10% is like visual regressions in there. And then that's what your content creators can help with. If not, the content creator would then say, okay, screw this, I'll go back to the old way if they couldn't figure out how to make it work. And they would call, all of you to come figure it out, how to fix that. So that's essentially the high-level approach, which we're thinking about migrating to Experience Builder. So 3 steps of how we are planning to do this. I know that if you've watched my previous presentations, I've been pretty vague about how are we actually doing this, when are we planning to start doing anything about this. The challenge has been that, Experience Builder has been a moving target. It's very hard to actually start planning on these things as things are still changing. We're finally starting to get to a place where we're actually starting to plan on how this would all work. And I'm actually announcing for the first time that we have a sub-initiative of Experience Builder for the migration effort, which Kristen Paul, who is here, is going to be leading. She's not going to be doing all the work, so she's going to be just helping coordinate, helping make sure that people understand what needs to happen. And that's why we need help from everyone who is interested in getting into this. I know there's a bunch of organizations who have already raised interest in this, but if you are interested, just reach out to me or Kristen. You can just come talk to us on Experience Builder Slack channel, and we'll loop you in the discussions that are happening around the planning of this. So while I know this is still pretty early stages for this, the fact that we are at least kicking off an initiative and we have people in place to start thinking about this is a big step forward, because we didn't even have that before. So what does the timeline look like for this? So we are looking into, we are essentially in March of 2025. We just did an early preview 2 release this week, which is essentially a more polished demo of what we shipped in Barcelona. It has the features that I just showed you before. We are looking at stable release in Q3. I have 5 months in here, but the target is actually to have that before Vienna. So it's going to be in between 5 to 7 months probably from now when we are targeting that stable release. And then that's not all. We have a big roadmap of items, new features, and improvements that we are planning for after that 1.0 release. So the 1.0 release that we have is still pretty centered around developer and content creator personas. We have a lot of items on the roadmap where we believe that we can actually leverage the framework that we've established to build even more visual tools, where maybe you could build your components visually and things like that. That would then actually enable a designer coming in and start making changes on their own. So that's what we are planning to do later, after we have the 1.0 out. So you might be asking, how is this different from the other builders that are out there? So my answer to that is that Experience Builder provides that fast time to market that you can expect from other CMS builders out there or website builders out there. But it provides all of the flexibility that Drupal provides. So it doesn't limit you the same way that other tools do. So it's kind of that trade-off that we had before, where you are either limited to having a cookie cutter website, or you have to write a lot of complex code. Well, now with Experience Builder, you don't have to build a cookie cutter website, and you can go to that unlimited amount of flexibility that Drupal provides, because if you still have all of that power behind it. So that's pretty much what I had for today, but I do have one more thing in here. All right, so that is the Drupal CMS design system. So that is something that we are building with Media Current. We're targeting that for the same time as when we are releasing Experience Builder. It is focused around accelerating the building of Drupal sites. So we have a pre-built design system that is leveraging Experience Builder and its capabilities. We're going to have some really high-quality designs that we're going to ship as examples of how you can use that design system. So as you saw in the video, those are some of the designs that we're targeting to build using that design system. The idea of building those designs is making sure that it's a really flexible design system that you can actually build, that you can use to build your site using your own brand. So it has all of the flexibility needed in there. And it's going to be available later this year. So that's all. No more surprises in my session. Experience Builder is Drupal's new approach for low-code site building and content creation. So not just content creation, but also very much in the site building territory. Scheduled to be later, be released later in 2025 as part of Drupal CMS. And you can follow the progress that we're making in the Experience Builder channel on Drupal Slack. I think things are getting pretty active in there right now. So that's pretty much the content that I had for today. So I'm wondering, do you feel more ready? I hope you're at least more ready than what you felt before. I hope there was something new that you learned. I hope there's something that excited you. I'm happy to take questions because we have some time till the end of the session.
So I'm curious, so if I have a content type that I'm using Experience Builder with, what sort of happens to like the classical edit form if someone needs to edit meta information or taxonomy, like they still do that in Experience Builder or would it go to the classes?
So we are, so the question was, what happens to the classical node edit form, essentially? I think that was the question. Yeah, so we are planning in having ways in which you can have that classical node edit form displayed inside Experience Builder. We're currently kind of looking at, there's different ways in which we can approach that for the 1.0 release. So I can't really make a strong commitment whether we're going to have that node edit form inside Experience Builder at the point of 1.0 release. But either way, we are going to provide an integrated experience where everything sort of between Experience Builder and the classical node edit form, if that is still what we recommend people to use, is going to be smooth. So we are going to have, because the structured content essentially requires a form for it to be filled. So we very much are going to provide an experience that allows you to use the form going forward. In terms of what happens to your existing content types that are not using Experience Builder, they can continue using the node edit form, even if you have Experience Builder installed. All right?
My question is essentially, how do I find out more about this Drupal design system? But in detail, it's described as having elements of Figma, Storybook, and Drupal involved. Does that mean you can export design tokens from Figma into Storybook, get a workflow where you're creating components in Figma, get all that intelligence to find its way to Drupal without using the fancy AI thing that people were talking about earlier?
So the question was, the demo of the Drupal CMS design system includes mention of Figma and Storybook. There was something about AI as well.
Forget that part.
Okay, forget about that part. Okay, so, and there was a question: how can I learn more about that? Essentially, so I know that Media Current. I think there's a session about it specifically in here at DrupalCon where you can get more information on that. In terms of what I can elaborate on, what it means is that the Figma part is essentially that we are going to be shipping the same designs that we would have the Experience Builder versions for. So you can then essentially, as a designer and developer, start in a coordinated place where you can see this is the Figma design, this is the design in Drupal, and then the Drupal design is something that can be exported into Storybook as well. It's essentially the components that you have in that Drupal design system that gets exported into Storybook. Primarily, the idea being just that we provide those assets for you to use them as a real starting point. Because if you don't ship a Figma design for them, it's going to be actually challenging for you to then get your designers in and make changes to the design itself. There's actual AI work happening by Jamie and Marcus where some of that could be automated, but it's not part of this project specifically. So the question is, can you talk about the scenario where you have parts of the page where you have very sort of rigid structure, where you have predefined fields or content that you want to display in there, or predefined structure that you want to display there. Then you have some parts of the page where there's more flexibility for you to customize it, and maybe at the end there's still, again, some more rigid structure in there. Common scenario from real life, just to give imagination, is that a product page where you are selling bicycles, you want to display sort of a consistent display of the product name, what are the size options that you have there, what are the colors, and so on. And then maybe you want to tell a story of the bicycle after that. And the story about the bicycles is something that your marketing team is going to go in, and they're not going to think about what kind of story does the other bicycle there have, because they go one by one on that. And that's why you need then the flexibility to tell the story in there. So Experience Builder does facilitate that in a way where you can you can build a content type template where you specify that I want to display in this component these fields. So that is the rigid bit. But what we add to that is we have the concept of slots. So content type templates can have slots themselves. So you can expose a slot from a content type template and say that, okay, in here, a content creator can come in and add components, and they can only do that in that slot. And you can have one or many or zero slots if you want everything to be locked down on a content type template.
So quick follow-up, what's the permissioning like around slots?
What's the permissioning around slots? We don't have any permissioning in Experience Builder right now. So that's still to be defined. Let's put it that way. I would say that I don't think we have a specific permission around slots right now, but we have a permission which essentially prevents you from using the Experience Builder visual editor itself. So if it's a user who's able to edit with Experience Builder using pages, they're probably going to be then able to edit those slots as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Will we be able to export the content from Experience Builder and vice versa? Will we migrate existing content to Experience Builder?
The question is, can you export content from Experience Builder, and can you import existing content in there? So the importing of existing content, follow-up question, is that content in Drupal, or is that something that is outside of Drupal? Okay, so in terms of the answer is that it's content in Drupal. In terms of that, Kristen is leading the initiative where they are planning on how do we actually migrate content from Paragraphs, Layout Builder, these existing tools that sort of provide a similar solution to Experience Builder. So that would provide a path for you to bring in your content in. In terms of exporting, so there's ways in which we've been thinking about potentially providing APIs which would allow you to access the content from there. So that is one way in which you could export it. I don't necessarily have any other way in mind that right now that you could use to actually get the content from there. But with an API, you could access all of the content. They are essentially content entities in Drupal, so you can access the same way as other content entities. The question is, can you version control your code components? So you can version control your code components because of the code components created using the in-browser code editor are config entities, so you will be able to export those, and it stores them as config. That might not be the most readable format in terms of like if you are doing an actual sort of Git review process, and that's where the CLI tool then comes in, where we envision that that's probably going to be the way in which a lot of these more developer-centered teams are going to use as their tool of choice. So that allows you to then export those components in there and have them as just like regular code, just like any other component. What's the future of block layout page? It's probably going to remain there or somewhere for quite a while, but in terms of Experience Builder provides us a much more rich experience in terms of editing your regions, because of you're able to use other than blocks in there, because you can use components, and then you can also nest those inside there. So you can use like a container for your header, and then you can place multiple blocks or components in there, whereas what block layout provides is essentially just a single list of items in there. So from that perspective, what Experience Builder provides is superior. What is missing from Experience Builder is the visibility conditions right now. So we would need that in order to actually then be able to fully get rid of block layout for everything. But that is something that we do have to think about because it is not an uncommon scenario to configure visibility conditions. We just have to think about what is the right way of doing that in Experience Builder. Is it a one-to-one to what exists in block layout today, or is there maybe some other way in which we approach that?
Are there any command line or like Rush command items that are on the timeline on the roadmap?
So you can leverage, the question was, are there any drush commands on the roadmap? So I don't think we have any specific drush commands in mind right now. Basically everything that you have in there, like config export, for example, it works already with Experience Builder. So I don't think we have anything that we're tracking right now, but if you have any ideas on specific tasks that you believe that should be automated with drush or other command line tools, I think we could totally explore that. It's just, yeah, it is not on our roadmap right now. But it is a very sort of, even though Experience Builder has a lot of React aspects to it, it is still essentially very much a Drupal module, which you can integrate to in similar ways to any other Drupal module. So we will be able to build drush commands, for example, if we want to.
Is everything intended to be a component terminology? Look like the button as a component, which we call an element. Kind of atomic design, we got different terminology, but is everything intended to be a component?
The question is everything intended to be a component? The answer is that no, but we have, for example, element is a terminology that we are reserving to ourselves as something that we are actually planning to, or that we need in future if we provide a visual component builder, because then you would have to have a stable set of elements that you can use to visually build components in there. So you will not be able to provide elements yourself because of that. In terms of categorizing your components, is that right now everything is just in a flat list. So everything, essentially what we see in the library is just stuff that comes from your theme in there, like all of the components. We are going to provide categorization of that in future so that you can then specify a more polished set of components in there. And then even though everything is a component in there, you can use different strategies to group them. The question is about the global regions. So we call it, I think we call them global regions. I hope that consistently in the UI. We have sections, which is a collection of components, which is then you use to construct pieces of the page. So we have global regions, and in the themes that we've highlighted so far, we've shown header and footer because that's the most common scenario. But those are actually coming from the theme of the site. So whatever you have in your theme is going to show up. So if you enable Olivero, it's going to show you like, I don't know, 15 different regions in there. So it's not just, it doesn't demo very well. And it's also just because of the way that we've built themes today is that, let's say header, you probably split that into four or three different regions in there, which you just don't need to do with Experience Builder because of the whole header can be mapped into a single containers that can then contain those slots. But like, let's say if you want to have a sidebar, for example, like you would totally be able to add that there. It's just that the sidebar, for example, is not a very common design choice at the moment. Yep.
Based on what you know in the timeline for Q3, Q4, do you think there's going to be an official training for all of this for everyone, for my office or others to send people to for this? Like that's a one-time thing they can go?
The question was, is there plans to have onboarding or training sessions for this so that I could send my staff in my organization to training for this? And the answer to that, unfortunately, right now is no. But I think that's a really good idea, and I have some folks that I actually want to talk to because I think that would be really valuable. And there's a lot of decisions that we've done in terms of design and the way that we've built Experience Builder that actually enable that type of generic onboarding and training, because we are about certain UI elements, we are much more opinionated than what Drupal has been historically, so that things actually remain more consistent in there across different sites. So it enables us to actually provide that generic training materials. But yeah, thank you, great question. Or, yeah. I think we are at time. Thank you, everyone.